We're recording.
Wonderful. And then Shannon, would you mind starting with our pre-meeting housekeeping reminders?
Yes. Welcome committee members, liaisons, and members of the public to the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission Grant Eligibility and Support Committee meeting. Thank you for joining us. We are using Zoom with the goal to foster a more inclusive environment and effective meeting. If you would like to comment during the meeting, please use the raised hand feature. Please utilize this tool to virtually indicate that you would like to speak in order to help the chair facilitate the discussion. A friendly reminder that this is a video conference. Per Bagley-Keene requirements, all cameras must be kept on for the duration of the meeting. If you are unable to have your camera on, you must indicate a reason for your non-appearance during the meeting. Please be aware of your surroundings behind you. All committee meetings will be recorded and posted to the State Bar website. Zoom captioning is available. To enable, select Live Transcript at the bottom of your Zoom screen, then select Enable Auto Transcription. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. Chris, do you want to take roll for everyone formally?
Yes. And while I do that, Shannon, would you mind offering to promote our director, Joyce? Thank you. Okay. Gonzalez.
Here.
King.
Here.
Judge Klein.
Here.
Milrod.
Here.
Pryor.
Here.
Stalker.
Here.
And Galkin.
Here.
So that's 7 of 7 commissioners here. So we do have quorum. And now I'll do the roll for our advisors and staff and other presenters. Justice Rodriguez.
Here.
Judge Wayne Gutierrez. Absent. For liaisons, Selena Copeland from LAC. Not yet. Lauren Klein from LAC. And just in time, Melanie Snyder from the Judicial Council.
I am here.
Wonderful, thank you. Hi, Melanie. And Ewan Kim, also from the Judicial Council. Okay, absent. And then I'll do State Bar staff. Christopher McConkey is here. Crystal Bunding. Lana Martin is going to be joining us, I think, a little bit later for their presentation. Shannon Crossley. Hi, Shannon. Erica Carroll. And if Erica's in the attendee pool, feel free to offer to promote Erica, Shannon. And then Michael Chong. And Michael will be joining us for his presentation. Mara Vibey will be joining likely during her presentation. And then our director, Joyce Song. Hi, Joyce.
Hi, everyone.
And I see that Selena Copeland from LAC has joined us. Hi, Selena. And I also see that Ewan Kim from the Judicial Council is joining right now. Hi, Ewan. All right, that completes the roll, Jason.
Thank you very much, Chris. At this time, we can move forward to the public comment portion of our agenda. I will ask Shannon if she can indicate whether or not there's anyone with their hand raised that is interested in public comment, and then I can do the rest of the spiel.
There is no one. Oh, I'm sorry. One person has their hand raised.
Okay, well, in that event, related to public comment, I would ask that you keep comments limited to 3 minutes and make sure as best you can to focus on commenting for any items that are on the agenda or relate to matters that are within this committee's jurisdiction, specifically the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission and its committee's exercise oversight of funding for free civil legal services for indigent Californians. Thank you very much.
I have allowed the first person to speak.
Anne?
So,
May not realize she's can be unmuted.
Yeah, and again, if you are trying to speak, we can't hear you. It doesn't appear that you're muted, but we can't hear you.
And if you're having a technical issue on your end, perhaps with your microphone, we can always try and circle back once at the very end of public comment to see if it's resolved.
Yeah, I might suggest checking the audio next to the microphone and clicking the caret icon, the little arrow there, and making sure you're selecting an active microphone. Let's go ahead and move to the next person. And we'll try to circle back to get your comment after.
Suzanne is allowed to speak.
Hello, my name is Suzanne Ravutsky. Can you hear me? Okay, I'm here representing Contra Costa Senior Legal Services, and I'm just wanting to encourage all of you to be in favor and support of having summer judicial fellows. We found that to be an incredibly worthwhile experience, and we would love to encourage that support. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Derek is allowed to speak.
All right, hello, can you hear me?
Can hear you. Go ahead.
All right. Hello, my name is Derek Moore. I'm a current 2L at Chapman School of Law. I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on item 4.2 on the agenda. I've known for my entire life that I wanted to dedicate myself to service of others, namely families of students with disabilities, as well as SoCal's unhoused population and people in need of affordable legal aid. Thanks to the work of Brooke and Elder and other organizations like them, I've had the chance to learn what service to the community looks like and what it means to people who need it most. Uh, while I found the work rewarding, I wouldn't have been able to take on that summer intern position without the funding. That funding allowed me to continue to pay to live in SoCal and survive throughout the summer. Without that funding, I wouldn't have been able to uh, work and still live in California over that summer. So it's my opinion that scenario 2 would provide a better result for students like myself, as well as populations in need and families in rural areas. By spreading more funding to more organizations, more students can have the opportunity to work in public interest and more families can receive the aid that they need. Thank you again for your time and hope you decide to support our vulnerable populations.
Thank you, Derek. We want to give Anne another shot, see if her mic is resolved.
Anne is allowed to speak.
Can you hear me now? I apologize for
There you go. Wonderful. Go ahead.
the earlier issues. I just joined the Elder Law and Disability Rights Center 3 weeks ago, so I'm still sorting out some issues, but I also would like to comment in support of agenda item 4.2 and specifically scenario 2 for the funding, expanded funding for additional providers. And as Derek mentioned, the Elder Law and Disability Rights Center provides opportunities for students to serve particularly vulnerable population, and expanding the funding to additional organizations would be extremely beneficial to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. I see Selena has her hand up, so go ahead.
Mine is a brief comment. I just wanted to get on stack. LAC is also in support of scenario 2. I think we support the scenario every year of spreading the fellows to more organizations. I think it really helps create the pipelines where some organizations wouldn't hire any fellows if not for this really fantastic program. And in many cases, having one fellow also prompts them to find funding for a second. So there's this multiplier effect that's really important. And also for those of you who have been following the legal aid summer funding project, at LAC, we survey organizations to see who is paying their law students And one of our earlier hypotheses is that funding some law students would actually fund a lot more. And that does seem to be proving to be true. We also survey law schools to figure out how they're paying their law students to see how that's interplaying. So I provide that information to Elizabeth Hom every year, and it's a really fantastic program, but we're in support of Scenario 2.
Thank you for that. It looks like we're probably good on public comment. So with that, we'll close out public comment and move to the chair's oral report. Just thanking everyone for being here. As a reminder, the role for our committee is to ensure comprehensive oversight and support of grantee compliance across all Legal Services Trust Fund Commission grant programs, while maintaining consistent standards and promoting accountability. We have 6 items today, even though I think the agenda will still go by pretty quickly. There are 6 items on our agenda. So we have approval of the 2026 IOLTA and EAF grant budgets. Starting this year, our charter allows us to approve these important budgets at the committee level, so we get the authority here. Approval of the 2026 Legal Aid Leaders Fellowship grant funding recommendations. We'll be making a recommendation to the full commission for November 7th meeting. A delegation of authority to staff to approve the 2026 partnership grant budgets. Staff has approved these budgets in the past years. We'll be describing a special need to do that again this year, so we'll hear more about that later. Approval of a late 2024 grant budget deviation and a timely 2025 partnership grant budget modification request, or timely request, plural. Similarly, approval of timely 2024 and 2025 IOLTA and EAF grants, as well as 2025 additional EAF grant budget modification requests. So a bunch of budget modification requests coming through. And then finally, approval of the 2025 Care Court grant budgets. And with that summary of what we're looking at today for our agenda, I will pass it over to Chris for staff's report.
Thank you, Jason. And I've updated the role to reflect that Judge Wayne Gutierrez has joined us. Thank you so much. Hi, Judge Wayne Gutierrez. Okay, so for staff's report, I have 4 quick updates. One is that the State Bar staff conducted a site visit with a support center near the end of September that we've been working with them to understand certain findings. Because of the timing of this committee meeting and also the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission meeting, this being the committee's last meeting of this calendar year and November 7th being the last meeting of the commission for this calendar year, we consulted with Jason and one of the commission co-chairs and others to see if it's something we needed to agendize for this meeting or bring straight to the commission. And because we're still in our fact-finding and analysis stage, we are going to be bringing any update and recommendations to the full commission on November 7th. So that's something we conferred with Jason and others on to avoid presenting an update prematurely. The grantee is fully aware of this and has been aware of that plan for several weeks, and we're going to continue to work with them to make sure there's full transparency and no surprises and everyone feels ready. But I just want to announce that because you'll hear about it on November 7th. I didn't want you to wonder what that was. Similarly, we had a site visit with a QLSP that serves Southern California that might have findings around, that has findings around the way they supervise pro bono attorneys. So earlier this calendar year, this committee gave staff guidance that we should continue to work with the program through the site visit process, inclusive of their opportunity to respond to those findings before bringing anything to the committee. But we wanted to just give you a heads up that there might be an update about that site visit at a future committee meeting, but it is still within the window for them to provide their response. And we didn't feel that it was necessary to bring that update today. But just a flag, there might be an update at a future committee meeting. And it could just be an everything is fine update, or there might be a recommendation relating to one QLSP's supervision of pro bono attorneys. I wanted to let you know that one of the 2025 grantees, Elevate Community Center, which this is their first year receiving IOLTA and EAF funding, has decided to close its doors. They let staff know this after the last GES committee meeting, so this is our opportunity to update you. And we've been working with them to close out their grants early, inclusive of invoicing for unspent funds, if any. We did have the opportunity, since it was their first year of funding, to do a site visit with them, which is our normal practice. So we were happy that we were still able to do that, but now we're essentially in the closeout phase. Elevate Community Center is a QLSP. And then my last update is that another QLSP prison law office needed to make technical edits to their by-county budgets for IOLTA and EAF for 2025. Staff learned that their by county budget totals didn't match their county allocations, but their full, if you summed their budgets together, it did match their full award. So those were necessary, I'll call them conforming edits, to make sure those by county budgets matched. I wanted to provide that update because this committee's predecessor committee, which was the Eligibility Budget and Review Committee, had approved those budgets last fall. So I wanted to bring that update to you as an FYI that prison law office has made those necessary technical corrections. So their by-county budgets for 2025 now match. All right, those are staff's updates. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you. With that, Selena, go ahead.
Well, I have a question for Chris. I think other members of this committee may be interested in hearing his response. I'm afraid that mergers or nonprofits closing down will be really common over the next 18 months. And I'm curious if organizations reach out to you in advance, or if you are as surprised as others of us are surprised. And so I'm just curious about your process and how you open up that communication, because some of them could merge with another QLSP instead of closing their doors, for example.
Yeah, so I think it happens. It has been happening just rarely enough that it's hard to say what the pattern is. Our grant agreements do require grantees to let us know if that in the event of certain things. So if the ED leaves or if they decide to shut down, and I think a merger would be within the scope of those things, they should notify us within a certain number of days of making that decision. I can't recall personally a merger from the last few years where I could say like they reached out to us right away or felt like it was towards the end of the process, but we would certainly encourage them to reach out when they felt like the decision had been made or was about to be made, to just give us an early heads up. We can certainly facilitate the continuation of grant funding to like the appropriate successor organization if it's like if the eligibility is preserved and otherwise it would comply with state bar rules and all relevant statutes. So I think we've done that in the past, and we would do what we could to make sure that we facilitated that. I don't know if Joyce has anything to add to that point, but please, yes, LAC, let them ask LAC members to let us know if they're thinking about it, or like once the decision feels like it's approaching.
All right. Well, with that, I will move on to the minutes. I hope everyone has had an opportunity to review the July 25th, 2025 open session of minutes. And assuming that you all have, I would kindly ask for a motion to approve those minutes.
Moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. So I heard Judge Klein moved, and and Angie, thank you for seconding. I'll take the vote. Gonzalez,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Judge Klein,
Yes. Excuse me. Yes.
Milrod,
Yes.
Pryor,
Yes.
Stalker, looks like Bob might be
unmuted
muting
and
himself.
muted again. He may have cut off his own audio. Go ahead, Bob.
Oh, interesting. So you're off mute on Zoom, but not. Yeah, maybe it's on your end.
Your mic isn't picking you up even when you're unmuted, Bob.
Can you use a hand signal?
Seems like this is going around everywhere.
And it may be appropriate once Bob has resolved his audio for me to record his vote. No, I'm sorry, Bob, not yet.
Nothing.
It's okay. We know you're with us. You'll keep working on it. I'll skip over Bob for now. This vote is on its way to passing. So Galkin.
Yes.
And Bob, when you resolve your audio, I'd be happy to record your vote. But this motion has currently passed with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 yeses, 0 nos, 0 absents, 0 abstentions, and I'm noting that Bob has not been able to record his vote yet.
Nothing.
Not yet,
Sorry,
Bob.
Bob.
I'm sorry, not yet. No, there is a it's a, yeah, but and Bob, don't worry. As soon as you fix it, I'll be sure to circle back to you for that. But the motion carries. Jason.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Well, we'll go ahead and move on to the business items for now then. Starting with action item 4.1, action on 2026 IOLTA EAF budget-related issues and approval of the 2026 IOLTA EAF budget proposals. I'm going to go ahead and invite Eric Carroll to present. Go ahead, Eric.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Erica Carroll. I'm a lead program analyst with the Office of Access and Inclusion. I'm here to speak with you about 2026 IOLTA EAF budget approval process. So just an overview of what we'll cover today. I'll spend a little time on the background of an overview of the process itself, and then we'll get into items that require committee attention and resolution, including late submissions, deviations from our recommended expense ratios, capital additions requests, and then the final overall budget approvals. So just some background. Budget approval is considered part of the eligibility process. So once organizations were found eligible in August at the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission meeting, our staff ran the funding formula and released tentative allocations to organizations later that month. Once the tentative allocations are released along with the budget forms, organizations have 30 days to submit their budget proposal. This year, budgets were due on September 25th. And then once we receive those budget proposals, staff reviews them to make sure that the activities that are contained in those proposals are considered qualifying activities under the governing authorities, that all of the proposals conform to our required budgeting parameters, and of course that they accurately reflect the tentative allocations that were communicated to the grantee. Between IOLTA and EAF, IOLTA is considered core funding, and so organizations, when they're budgeting, do not have to tie those funds to a specific project. They can spread them out across their various program areas as needed, and many of them do. EAF is a little bit different from IOLTA. It is administered on the same basis, but the budget proposals for EAF do require that organizations articulate specific activities that will be funded with the EAF dollars. And they also need to demonstrate, for example, that their non-personnel expenditures are tied specifically to their EAF activities. So a slightly different presentation for the EAF budgets. And then a number of items can come up during review that require committee attention. As I mentioned, these include the topics that we're going to cover: the late submissions, expense ratios, and capital additions. And so I'll turn to late submissions next. Under State Bar Rule 3.680F, staff has discretion to accept application materials, which in this case would include budgets, up to 1 business day past the deadline. Anything that we receive after that point would have to be brought to the committee for review and approval. This year we had 5 late budget submissions. 3 of those were within that 1 business day deadline, and staff did accept those submissions for review. We did have 2 organizations that went past that deadline. One was the Center for Workers' Rights. We received their budget proposal 5 days after the deadline. When staff communicated with this organization, we learned that there had been a calendaring mistake. The organization had calendared another State Bar deadline. There was a deadline for budget modification requests the following week. They had miscalendared this deadline along with the budget modification deadline the week later. And that's why they missed the deadline. And then they also cited limited staff capacity, that they currently have little to no administrative support. to assist with keeping track of these deadlines. And again, explained that as part of the reason for their delay. The organization did detail in their letter the steps that they are taking to address these issues, and one of them being that they are seeking to hire an operations manager that will help with this tracking. And so they reported they hope to fill that position by the end of the year. And given that they're already sort of proactively taking steps to address the concerns that led to the delay, staff is recommending that the committee accept the late submission without conditions. I should go back and say that under State Bar Rule 3.680F, if the committee wants to accept a late submission, you can accept it with or without conditions. So the committee could impose conditions on a grantee if, for example, there were a pattern of lateness, or if there were not compelling reasons or circumstances around the delay, for example. The second late submission was from Wage Justice Center. We received their budget proposal 10 days after the deadline. Staff sent several emails and made a number of phone calls to the organization before we were able to get in touch with the organization to communicate about their delay with the budget. When we were able to get in touch, the executive director cited that she had a health-related emergency that had her out of office, and also said that compounding that issue was an email misconfiguration, which prevented her from seeing the State Bar emails that were being sent. Given sort of the length of the delay, the difficulty in getting in contact with the organization in general, staff had originally proposed potentially imposing conditions on the organization, because we also learned that this is not the first time that the organization has had trouble getting back to the State Bar on a timely basis in terms of following up or making edits to things like their application. However, the organization did acknowledge the need to update their protocols and improve their processes around this. And so State Bar staff would recommend that we work with the organization first to ensure that they have developed that protocol and are following it before considering any other conditions. So a small revision to what was in the memo, we would actually recommend that State Bar staff follow up with this organization first and bring it back to this committee if the concerns are not resolved. So moving on from late submissions, we have our recommended expense ratios as part of the budgets. So it's been a longstanding commission practice that there's an expectation, the way the budgets are broken down is we have personnel and non-personnel categories, and we also have program versus administrative expenses. And so the expectation is that organizations typically should budget 75% or more on their program expenses, and then 25% or less on administrative expenses. And then similarly, 75% or more on their personnel expenditures and 25% or less on non-personnel. There's also an expectation that the benefits category comprise 40% or less of salaries. And the rationale behind this being that funding should be going towards services to indigent persons or to QLSPs. So deviations are not strictly prohibited from these expense ratios, but they do require committee attention. And so when an organization deviates from that breakdown, they provide a narrative explanation that we submit to the committee for your consideration and approval, or of course, if not accepted, then we would go back to the organization to have them revise their budget to bring it into alignment with these recommended ratios. In this instance, all of the recommended expense ratio deviations in the 2026 IOLTA EAF budget proposals, staff is recommending approval, and I'll go through specifically what those requests were. So for the personnel versus non-personnel deviations, we had 4 organizations that requested to deviate from the traditional or expected breakdown. So Center for Access to Quadros allocated 60.87% of their budget to personnel expenditures and 39.13% to non-personnel expenditures, and this is under their EAF grant. The organization in their explanation expanded on the need for this and their proposal for their EAF project is to develop a tool that will help organizations prepare subpoenas to obtain the necessary information to draft a quadro. So the organization, given that the project is technology-based, indicated a need for things like the ability to test and build other infrastructure around that project. And so that's why more funding is going towards non-personnel expenditures, but that it is integral to the success of this project overall. Then with Coalition of California Welfare Rights Organizations, they had about 67% to personnel and 32.61% to non-personnel for their IOLTA budget, and then a similar proportion or breakdown for their EAF expenditures. In their budget, they cited a need to hire consultants. Given their small staff and some funding uncertainties, that led them to the decision to hire consultants on a contract service basis. And so in our budgets, contract service to clients is a line item that goes under non-personnel, but since it is essentially hiring personnel to do the work of the organization, staff felt that it would be appropriate to approve this deviation. Legal services for children devoted approximately 71% of their IOLTA funding to personnel costs, and then almost 29% to non-personnel. In their budget proposal, they explained that a number of other grants don't allow for things like non-personnel or administrative expenditures, and there have been increases in cost in terms of representation, specifically in the last year. For example, they cited that filing fees in immigration court have increased, and this is part of their core operations is providing services to undocumented immigrant youth. And so to cover the costs of representation that they otherwise wouldn't be able to cover, which could lead to either less representation or less effective representation, they requested devoting more funding to non-personnel expenditures. And then in the case of Riverside Legal Aid, 64.87% of their personnel, 64.87% went to personnel and 35.13% went to non-personnel for their EAF grant. And this organization is hiring a contract attorney for services to clients in guardianships, conservatorships, and small estates cases. And so since this will still be funding that's actually devoted to providing services to clients, again, we thought that it was an appropriate deviation. Then with the expense ratios in terms of program versus administrative costs, we had one organization, Family Violence Appellate Project, budgeted 67.99% to programs and 31.01% to admin for their IOLTA grant, and then 68.44% to programs and 31.56% to administration for their EAF grant. In their explanation, they cited that these costs will go towards salaries for their executive director and other staff that enable attorneys to focus more on their programmatic work. So rather than pulling attorneys from their work with QLSPs and other legal services organizations, that other staff would be able to cover these tasks. And so they were recommended for approval. And then for the benefits ratio, not to exceed 40% compared to salaries, we had one organization, UC Davis School of Law. Their benefits percentage was slightly over this line. 41.89% of their IOLTA budget went to benefits and 41% of EAF compared to salaries. And the explanation from this organization, it is a law school clinic within a larger organization, the UC Davis. They explained that the university has a non-negotiable composite benefit rate that they expect all of their departments and clinics to adhere to, and that what they budgeted for is in compliance with that benefit rate. And so they didn't feel that they had the ability to deviate from that based on their host institution's requirements. Given that it was fairly close to 40%, and this organization has hovered around 40% in prior years, coming in just under 40%. This is consistent with how they've budgeted essentially in prior years. And so they are recommended for approval for this deviation. And then capital additions. So the commission has guidelines for the purchase of real property that require organizations that want to budget more than $5,000 or 5% of their grant, whichever is lower, to report out those capital additions to the committee for review and approval. The underlying rationale for this is that funds shouldn't be used as an investment opportunity, but they should be going to support service delivery and enhancing the operations of the organization. I do want to note that there is currently actually a proposal that's just went through the Rules Committee yesterday to increase this threshold, because these guidelines were developed about 40 years ago and have never been updated. And so the amounts are quite low to trigger this review. And so the recommendation is to increase that threshold up to 50,000. But as they stand today, we still have the $5,000 or 5% trigger or threshold. So in that instance, this year we had one organization that exceeded that. We had Community Legal Services in East Palo Alto proposing $8,770 of their IOLTA budget to capital additions. In their explanation, they elaborated on the need to build or maintain their outdoor space for in-person clinics, that during the pandemic, they had started to provide services outdoors in order to be accessible to clients in a safe space. And what they learned was that it was actually a larger area that they could serve more people in a given clinic than they were able to once they were inside their building. And so they want to continue this practice, but to enhance the space and ensure it's appropriate for services. And so given sort of the unique space, the direct tie to services to clients, and the fact that this is a very small amount of money compared to the organization's overall grant, which is over $1 million, staff is recommending approval of this capital addition. And so for budget approvals, overall, we have 118 anticipated grantees for this coming grant year. 96 of those are qualified legal services projects and 22 are support centers. As I mentioned, staff has reviewed all of these budgets and followed up with organizations for clarification or correction as needed, and minor updates. And then after approval of these budgets today, the next steps in this process are for staff to prepare grant agreements that we typically distribute in early December, and then have those due back before disbursements begin to go out in January. And so with that, I'm happy to take it to the proposed resolutions, or answer any questions that you might have before that.
Any questions? Is anyone willing to make a motion or make the proposed motion that's on the floor?
So move.
Okay, go ahead, Patience. Can I get a second?
I'll second again.
I'm sorry, I should say that we have a few motions, and so I don't know if you want to take those all together, or if you'd like to vote on them separately.
Well, Patience is the one who made the motion, so I'll let her decide whether she'd like to combine them all for efficiency.
So actually, I am going to have to refrain from voting on the third resolution. So, and I imagine I'm not alone in that. So approving I'm looking at 4.1, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so others too, I imagine will abstain from voting on specific programs involved with adopting attachment C, which is not on this screen, but it's on either. So I guess I would move the first portion of the proposed resolution and request that we adopt this looks different than it does on my. I've got
Um,
this first. Oh, yeah, and then here are the other two. Okay. So I would take the first two and then leave for the resolve that we approve attachment C. I would leave that to a separate vote. So I'm moving the first two portions of this resolution.
I'm not sure I understand. The one on the screen, is your motion.
So there are actually, if you look at your agenda materials, there are three resolutions.
Right.
The first one is resolve that we accept the late budget submissions.
Right.
Second one is that we approve the personnel, non-personnel expense ratio, blah, blah, blah. I am proposing that we act on those two together first, and that's the one I move. That's what I'm moving to do right now.
Okay, I'll second that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And I've made sure to note that for the minutes. So Milrod has moved, King has seconded. We're taking the vote on the first two resolutions and not on the one that says GS committee approves all 2026 LDF budgets. The committee will handle that separately. So I'll take the vote. Gonzalez,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Judge Klein,
Yes.
Milrod,
Yes.
Pryor,
Yes.
Bob. Bob says yeah, thumbs up. Yes. Okay, I'm going to take that. Thank you, Bob. And Galkin.
Yes.
All right. So that is 7 yeses, 0 nos, 0 absence, 0 abstentions. Motion passes.
Why don't we move on to our final part here? Can I get a motion for the remainder that Patience was unable because of her refusal to move forward?
I have a question. Can a person make the motion if you're going to abstain from portions of because some of those organizations I'd have to abstain from.
Yes.
think
I just need to note your grantees or the applicants rather for which you're abstaining.
Well, then, yes, I'll make the motion to approve the last resolution.
Can I get a second?
I will second, but I will also need to list the agencies from which I will be abstaining.
So I have King has moved, Gonzalez has seconded. I will take the vote and please let me know. I'll take a little slower because I'm going to note any applicants for whom you're abstaining in your vote. So Gonzalez,
Bay Area Legal Aid, East Bay Community Law Center, Family Violence Law Center, Legal Access Alameda, Legal Assistance for Seniors.
thank you. Abstaining with respect to Bay Area Legal Aid, East Bay Community Law Center, Family Violence Law Center, Legal Access Alameda, and Legal Assistance for Seniors. King,
Yes, and abstain from San Luis Obispo Legal Assistance Foundation.
thank you. So yes, abstains with respect to San Luis Obispo Legal Assistance Foundations. Judge Klein?
Yes. No abstentions.
Thank you. Milrod?
Abstain from yes, and abstain from Central California Legal Services.
Yes, abstains from Central California Legal Services. Pryor?
Yes. Abstain from Ventura County Legal Aid.
Thank you. Abstains with respect to Ventura County Legal Aid. Stalker? I'm sorry. So I was looking at but was that a thumbs up? And do you have abstentions? You do have one. So I think we'll need to record that while the meeting is live and being broadcasted and on the record. So for now, I'm just going to note, Bob, that you would like to vote yes, and you do have an abstention, but we would need to collect that. Okay. And thank you, Bob. And Galkin.
Yes, I also have abstentions. I'm just trying to go through the list and I'm looking for the ones I at least have Inland County Legal Services, County's Legal Services, and Riverside Legal Aid are on here. Inland Empire Latino Lawyers Association as well. I believe that's all of them. Usually it's just like anyone who's doing business in Riverside County ends up being on my abstention list. But some of the names don't give that information as clearly as I would like.
Thank you. So it's a yes, and Inland County's Legal Services, Riverside Legal Aid, and Inland Empire Latino Lawyers Association. Did I miss one, Jason?
Those are the ones that jump out at me, that I would abstain to.
Okay. And then for Bob, one of the options, it just occurs to me, one of the options is you can call in. So don't, because you need to be on camera too. Don't, if you want to try this, don't turn off your camera, like stay like logged in on your computer. But if you want to try calling in just for the purposes of voting, we can, when we see you call in on the attendee pool, we can promote you and you can cast your vote aloud. If you want to try that. Maybe so. Jason, since we're actually running a little bit ahead of schedule, if you like, we can give maybe Bob a minute to call in and we can try and do that.
Sure, let's give that a shot.
Okay. And then I see we have Mara who will be our next presenter. So thank you, Mara, for hopping a little early. Now, Shannon, we want to look for Bob's call.
I'm keeping an eye out for it.
And then if you like, Jason, it's up to you as chair. If you want, we can also, I think, circle back. Oh, he's calling right now.
Calling right now, I feel like just give it a second and close and move on.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Hi, Bob. Welcome back.
Okay.
Well, you've been with us the whole
Thank
time.
you. Yeah, I upgraded my computer and it's got something going on.
That's okay.
Anyway, I vote yes and abstain with respect to Capital Pro Bono and Legal Services of Northern California. And the first vote, I think it was just on the minutes. I don't think I was live for that, and I vote yes on those.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bob. So for the vote on the minutes, the revised count is 7 yeses, 0 no's, 0 absent, 0 abstentions. So that motion still passes. And for the vote on the, because Bob voted with a thumbs up for the first 2 resolutions that the committee voted on. That stays 7 yeses, 0 no's, 0 abstention, 0 absent, 0 abstentions. And then for the third and final resolution, the final count is 7 yeses, 0 no's, 0 absent, 0 abstentions, with Bob abstaining as to Capital Pro Bono and Legal Services of Northern California. So the motion carries, Jason.
Erica, thank you very much.
Thank you. And Bob, if you just want to stay, if it makes sense for you to just kind of stay on the phone and on camera, you're welcome to do that. Well, you can just kind of like mute yourself on the phone, but then you have a connection.
Okay, thanks.
Right. Moving on to action item 4.2, approval of the 2026 Legal Aid Leaders Fellowship Grant funding recommendations. We have Mara here to present. So Mara, why don't you take it away?
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I want to start by extending my deepest thanks to all those who participated in the scoring process for this application, and to all those who showed up to provide public comment in support of the summer fellowship program. These are the fellowship recommendations or funding recommendations for the 2026 Legal Aid Fellowship Grant. As a quick reminder, the Legal Aid Fellowship Program is funded through a $10 out of the $45 opt-out contribution that goes towards legal aid on the attorney licensing fee statements. It is a competitive grant opened to all qualified legal service organizations and support centers. There is a preference for serving rural and underserved communities and organizations that serve clients regardless of immigration status. And the funds for these particular grant through BPC 61040 are allocated through June 30th or January 30th of 2030. We received an additional increase in applications for legal aid leader fellowships this year. In 2025, there was an increase in the allocated funding. So we saw a 70% jump in applications. This year, we saw an additional nearly 7% jump in applications. So overall, State Bar received 62 applications with requests for 290 fellows. The request in funding was $2.86 million. So another significant jump in support of this program. Grantees are allowed to request funding for multiple fellows and are required to pay a minimum of $7,500 in compensation. Organizations can request up to $2,500 for other direct and indirect costs. So the cap on funding requests for each fellowship is $10,000, but organizations can request downward of $7,500 per fellowship if they prefer. In terms of the application scoring process, the scoring team consisted of 2 members of the commission and 2 members of COAF who reviewed and scored application along with staff. The scoring process consisted of applications being divided between 4 scoring teams, and each scoring team included staff members and either one COAF member or a member of the commission. The scoring team members calibrated scores in July, and staff reviewed all applications for consistency to ensure that we were correctly calibrated across all 4 scoring groups. The 4 sessions were conducted to score applications and then compile final scores. And during those scoring meetings, staff discussed with the commissioners and COAF members the desire to fund as many fellows as possible and to distribute funding across the state. And based on these conversations, the staff then created essentially a way to meet that desire and distribute the funding across the state to as many organizations as possible. In doing that, staff produced 2 possible funding scoring scenarios, which we'll be presenting to you today for your consideration. As a quick overview, the selection criteria and funding preferences are the 2 different portions of the rubric, and the average scores were respectable. We received very strong applications for this grant, and they were in line with the strong applications we received in the previous year. The overall average score was an 80.8%, and the high score was a 93.8. Low score was a 56.9. So based on the scoring team's discussion, staff developed 2 funding options. For both of these funding options, we incorporated the recommendation that applicants would receive funding up to a maximum of 3 fellows, and this is based off of the availability of funding. As discussed in the memo, there was a decrease in the amount of donations that were received, and we're projecting a similar donation rate for the following year. Because there was a shortfall in what we had projected for 2025, we're having to take $200,000 to reimburse the IOLTA admin fund that had fronted the funding for this particular fellowship. So as a result, we are only able to provide 1.2 million in fellowship funding for 2026. So it reduces the cap of fellows. Nearly 57% of the applicants requested between 1 to 3 fellows. So the majority of applicants did request 3 or fewer fellows. And then we had a number of outlier applicants requesting anywhere as high as 30 fellows. So we do feel that this still meets the overall need being requested by organizations. Applications would also need to meet an overall score threshold of 60%. We feel that this ensures sufficient application strength, and it is also the same percentage threshold that was used for the 2025 LALF grant. Funding scenario 1 is a single step process. Applications would receive funding up to the requested number of fellows or 3 fellow maximum, whichever is lower. And funding would be distributed based solely on the overall application score. And we would start from the highest score and move our way down until funding is depleted. This first funding scenario would maximize the competitiveness of the grant. And based on the available funding, scenario 1 would fund 122 fellows at 50 organizations. Funding would run out before reaching all applicants with scores above 60%. So 11 eligible applicants would not be funded, 9 of whom have scores between 72 and 61%. 2 of the applications scored below 60%, and 1 additional applicant is no longer eligible. In terms of scenario 2, which is the scenario that staff recommends, we would begin instead by funding applications with above average overall scores or above average points for funding preferences. So funding services in rural communities, serving clients regardless of immigration status. These organizations would receive an initial distribution of 2 fellows or their requested number of fellows, so whichever one is lower. We would then distribute 1 fellow each to the remaining unfunded applicants and with scores above 60%. And this would ensure that each of the applicants that have submitted strong applications would receive at least 1 fellow. The remaining funds after that process is completed would be to award a 3rd fellow to applicants with the highest overall scores. So we would begin at the top scoring application of a 93.9% and work downward until the funding is depleted. So following this procedure instead, which is based off of the scoring team's conversations regarding spreading the funding as widely as possible across the state and really trying to emphasize the statutory priorities of the grant and ensure that qualified applicants benefit from the grant funding, this scenario would fund 122 fellows at 59 applicant organizations. 2 applicants with scores of 57.9 and 56.9% would not receive funding as they are below the 60% threshold. 1 additional applicant is no longer eligible for the grant. So in summary, the distinction between these 2 funding scenarios is the number of organizations which would receive fellowship funding over the summer. The number of fellows being funded is the same regardless of the scenario that you choose to select. When discussing the potential funding scenarios, the following goals were identified. Emphasizing the statutory priorities, ensuring all qualified applicants benefit from grant funding, offering the greatest potential awards to organizations with the strongest applications, and helping to create a larger network of organizations who can compensate law students at a living wage. So I'm happy to answer any questions at this time regarding these 2 funding scenarios and the process by which we reached them.
Any questions? Selena, why don't you go ahead, and I think Patience waved her hands. I'm assuming that's a raised hand.
Oh, I'll go after Patience, since she's a commissioner.
Okay, Patience, go ahead.
I was just going to propose that we do something similar to what we did in the last resolution, and that is there are two issues here. One is the scenario, and the other is the funding. And it would be, I'm proposing that we approve scenario 2, and then do as a separate resolution do the adoption of the funding. The funding for the awards, the grant.
Okay. I'll come to you for a motion after Selena, probably, but okay.
My question is just about numbers, because I honestly could not remember, and this may have been in the memo and I just forgot. It looks like the amount available is less than what we originally anticipated. Is this based on revenue from 2024-5 licensing fees, or is this based on a 2026 forecast for licensing fees?
Both, I think is probably the most accurate answer. So it is partly because we wound up with a shortfall in 2025. We projected we were going to receive a certain amount, and there was a $200,000 shortfall. So next year, we anticipate that we will have a similar donation amount, but we need to make up for the $200,000 shortfall in order to make the IOLTA admin whole.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
Anything else? Hearing none, I think we can move on from discussion. And it was Patient's suggestion that we bifurcate to 2, I think. It looks like that would probably require a modification of the proposed resolution there.
Well, as I can say, Patient, since it's the way it's phrased here, does this look like you would still want to bifurcate this?
Actually, you're right. It presumes effect not in evidence that we approved scenario 2, but it will have that effect. So I'm good with it. So I move that this resolution, as it's drafted here, that we adopt.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Chris, would you like me to read the resolution, or are we good?
Sure. It's so short, and you.
Okay.
Such a lovely resolution. It's really long.
Thank you. So, should the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission Grant Eligibility and Support Committee concur, it is resolved that the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission Grant Eligibility Support Committee recommends to the LSTFC that it approve the 2026 Legal Aid Leaders Fellowship Grant Awards in funding scenario 2 included in attachment C.
And then I have Milrod moving.
Second. I think that was Bob Stalker, second.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. So, okay, Milrod moves, Stalker seconds. I'll take the vote. Gonzalez.
Yes, and I'm certain whether I should abstain as to the organizations that received it, that are on the list on schedule or attachment C.
So you would abstain as to referencing your earlier list. It would be Bay Legal, East Bay Community Law Center, Family Violence Law Center, Legal Access Alameda, and Legal Assistance for Seniors if they're being recommended under scenario 2.
Yes, correct.
Okay, I made that note. And
Thank you.
Yeah, so if they're on that list, they'll be abstained as to them. King.
Yes, with the same caveat as the abstention for the San Luis Obispo legal assistance, if that is on the, I don't think they are, but if they are.
Thank you. I have noted that. Klein, Judge Klein.
Yes.
Thank you. Milrod.
Yes, abstaining from Central California Legal Services.
Thank you. Pryor.
Yes, abstaining from Ventura County Legal Aid, please.
Thank you. Stalker.
Yes.
And then I don't know if Bob, if Legal Services of Northern California and Capital Pro Bono are on the list of in scenario 2, but did you want me to note abstentions with respect to them?
Yeah, I don't think they're on, but yeah, if they are, please.
Okay. And then Gulkin.
In the interest of convenience, unless you can document this, I'm just going to generally abstain and note that I am supportive of this because there are so many proposed recipients who do service in Riverside. If I listed them all, we would be here until 4 o'clock. So I'm not going to do that and just say generally abstain given how many of these providers are planning to provide services in Riverside, which is wonderful. I love that, but also that's too close to home. So there's that.
Thank you. So and Gulkin abstains. So that is 6 yeses with the recorded abstentions with respect to particular programs, 0 no's, 0 absence, and then 1 full abstention. So motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful.
All
Thank you,
right.
Mara.
Thank you, Mara.
All right, we will move on to 4.3, delegation of authority to approve the 2026 partnership grant budgets. And I think, I see Mikey's here. Michael Chung is here to present. Go ahead.
Hi, let me get my screen up. Great. Let me know you guys can see that okay? Perfect. Well, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I will be presenting on 4.3. It's a request for approval of delegation of authority to approve the 2026 partnership grant budgets. My name is Michael Chong. I'm a senior program analyst. So just providing a little bit of historical background. Historically, the partnership grants used to be approved through the Partnership Grant Committee. However, that has changed since now we have the GES. But the timeline was the Legal Services Trust Fund Partnership Grant Committee would review applications in April, June. Then July, August, the committee would create these recommendations, provide that to the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission. And then September through October, the Judicial Council would finalize the funding amounts through their process. Come November, grantees would be submitting their updated budgets to reflect their award amounts. And then December, we would release the signed, grantees would submit to us signed and return their agreements, and then we would release funds in January. So big changes that happened in 2025. The LSCFC approved the grant eligibility charter. Sorry, Grant Eligibility and Support Committee's charter in February, which provided and gave authority to approve proposed grant budgets for all grant programs. However, before this, staff had scheduled the committee's last meeting to be today, October 30th. And staff also had communicated and scheduled 2 programs that the deadline for the 2026 partnership grant budgets would be in November, similarly how it had been in previous years. Unfortunately, we recently realized that these dates would be precluded from the GES committee to be able to approve these budgets at its meetings. So in order to avoid any delays in releasing the partnership grant agreements, staff is seeking a delegation of authority to approve the budgets as it has in its previous years. In doing so, staff will also check and evaluate, as other items that the budgets equal the amounts of the awards that they get, that the budgets align with the recommended ratios for spending on program versus administration, and the personnel versus non-personnel of that 75-25%, and also that the activities are reasonable and permissible under this grant. And I do open it up for any questions.
Can I jump in on this one?
Yes.
to Michael. So and as your new committee coordinator, what I told Michael was, and our director Joyce was, I think it would be easy for next year to just make sure the GES committee's meeting, unless, barring changes to the charter, I suppose, to just schedule the workflow for partnership grants budget approval to fall before the GES committee's final meeting of the year. So this maybe the last time we ask, historically, like Michael said, staff has always had authority to approve these budgets, but now the new charter would have the committee do it. And next year, I think that would be easy to schedule it that way. So if the committee is supportive of doing it one more time where staff reviews, many of these budgets are for turning partnerships between legal aid and the court. So their budgets don't necessarily change wildly from year to year and enjoy sort of historical approval. These are largely, for the most part, returning partnerships.
Thanks, Chris. All right, any questions for Michael or Chris? Seeing none, I assume we need a motion to formally delegate. And we have one on the screen here. So would anyone like to make that motion?
I'll move.
I second.
Ms. Pryor, I'll take a vote.
So I have King moving, Pryor seconding. For the vote, Gonzalez,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Judge Klein,
Yes.
Milrod,
Yes.
Pryor,
Yes.
Stalker,
Yes.
thank you, Bob, and Galkin.
Yes.
So that is 7 yeses, 0 nos, 0 absents, 0 abstentions. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Wonderful. We're going to keep Michael on to talk about the approval of the late 2024 partnership grant budget deviation and the 2025 partnership grant budget modification requests.
Oops. Sorry. Cool. All right. Thank you again. We'll be providing information on the deviations. So, as we spoke about earlier, budget modifications, general grant provision 7.01 allows recipients that they should not be deviating from their approved budgets without written approval. Grantees are encouraged to submit a budget modification as soon as they are aware of a need to modify their budget. Also, the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission's functional matrix provides that budget modifications of 10% or less are permissible. Staff has the ability to approve requests between 10 and 25%, and those exceeding 25% require the Grant Eligibility and Support Committee's approval. And then after the grant period, budget deviations that exceed 10% that did not already receive an approved budget modification will need to come to the GES committee. So putting all of that information background, when reviewing the 2024 partnership grant report, it was identified that there was one award with a budget deviation exceeding that 10%, and they did not request a budget modification. I kind of summarized that in table 1. And again, this is for the 2024 partnership grant deviation. The grantee is Betsedic Legal Services. It was for their decedent estate self-help clinic. The deviation percentage was 19.19%. And they did request a carryover, and it's the same explanation due to the cost being lower than anticipated. They shifted some money around. Their response to this was they misunderstood or assumed that the carryover request would also fulfill the budget modification request. And moving forward, they will ensure that they will submit those separately. So that's for the 2024. For 2025, we did receive in the third quarter 4 budget modification requests. Staff did exercise its discretion to approve 2 of the requests that fell between the 10 and 25% of the award, and the remaining 2 are from Betsetic. The first one resulted in a 45.95% deviation. Again, this is due to increase in attorney and paralegal salaries and decreasing other staff and non-personnel expenditures. And then the second one that they're requesting results into a 48.8% deviation. And again, this would be decreasing paralegal salaries and increasing attorney salaries. The table on the screen provides more information on the different budget modifications that were provided. The top 2, which is Betsetic and mental health advocacy services, fall within that 10 and 25% and were approved by staff. The other 2, again, are there. And want to make sure you guys have a second to kind of look at that. And so staff recommendation is that we approve Betsetic's 2024 budget deviation. Again, the grantee has said that in its future, it will present budget modifications and carryovers separately before the grant period ends. And then we're also recommending that we approve Betsetic's 2025 budget modification requests because, as demonstrated, they are asking before the budget ends. Also, these modifications align with the grant budget, and it also shows that they're increasing the attorney time on these projects and reducing non-personnel and administrative expenses, showing that they are prioritizing attorney and paralegal time to provide services. Do we have any questions?
Looks like it.
Great. In that case, I've got a resolution on screen.
I don't think they need to be read.
Perfect.
For the record.
So are you moving?
Yes.
Milrod moves. Can I get a second?
I second.
Pryor.
Thank you. And the vote, Gonzalez,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Judge Klein,
Yes.
Milrod,
Yes.
Pryor,
Yes.
Stalker,
Yes.
and Galkin.
Yes.
So that's 7 yeses, 0 nos, 0 absent, 0 abstentions. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mikey. Moving on to action item 4.5, approval of the 2024-2025 IOLTA EAF and additional 25 additional EAF grant budget modification requests. And Chris, you're taking care of this one, yeah?
That's me. I'll share my screen. Okay, can you see my slides? Wonderful. So this one is similar to the update that Michael just gave with respect to partnership grants, but this is with respect to the interest on lawyers' trust accounts and equal access fund grants for 2 years, which is the result of IOLTA having multi-year spend down periods now. So that's why we have some budget modification requests for 2024 IOLTA grants. So this slide is kind of similar to the one that Michael just presented, so I won't spend much time on it. Just to flag again, it's the same thresholds for elevating something for committee review. And for the GES committees, per its charter, it now gets final approval on budget modification requests that exceed 25% or more of the award. And staff for these grants as well have authority to review and approve between 10 and 25%. Okay, so we do invite the grantees, similar to partnership grants, to submit their requests on a quarterly basis. So for the period of July through September, we received 23 requests for IOLTA and Equal Access Fund grant budget modifications. 7 of the requests were at or above 25% of the award in the amount that they deviated. And these 7 requests fell across 4 different awards. So we have 2024 IOLTA, 2025 IOLTA, 2025 Equal Access Fund, and then also the 2025 Additional Equal Access Fund grant. And as a reminder, the Additional Equal Access Fund grant came about as the result of the legislature's special session late last year and early this year, where it increased the amount of funding for 2025 EAF, but it did restrict the uses of those dollars for certain work that would protect Californians. So this grant has its own name. The 7 requests together, mostly, and you'll see several of them do this, seek to right-size spending that the program had budgeted for a loan repayment assistance program. That's of course a permissible expenditure for IOLTA and EAF. The programs don't always know at the beginning of the grant period what employee interest will be in participating. So if employee interest exceeds what they thought would happen, they might need to increase the amount of funding to support that program. If it's less, they want to move those dollars to other purposes in their budget. For the most part, employee interest was lower than grantees expected. We had one program that it was higher. We have proposals to increase spending on outreach staff for one of the providers. We have one provider, affordable housing advocate, that needs to shift spending away from a position that went unfilled, and they just moved it to attorney work. And then we usually see some changes to reflect the actual cost of non-personnel items that we review for reasonableness. So this was in the materials, but just to kind of leave it on the screen for like a few seconds in case it jogs a question. For the 2024 IOLTA grant, we have 3 requests that exceeded 25% of the award: Casa Cornelia, Greater Bakersfield Legal Assistance, and LACPA Council for Justice. I'll just point out that for Greater Bakersfield Legal Assistance, the deviation amount for their July through September request was actually only about $13,700 out of what was a pretty large IOLTA award. But it's when we calculate the running total of the deviation requests. So their running total is in excess of 25% of the grant, but this particular request is actually quite small. All 3 of these programs are trying to right-size their spending on their loan repayment assistance program, as well as other corrections. For 2025 IOLTA and 2025 EAF, our one program that had a request exceeding 25% of the award was Affordable Housing Advocates. It's actually a pretty small dollar amount you'll see in the deviation amount column, but their total award was such that it actually ended up being more than 25% of their request. But because the amount is so small, and in both instances, it's just to move money away from a position that went unfilled and to put it towards attorney time with no change in services deliverables, we recommended approving it. And then for the 2025 additional EAF grant, a similar request from Affordable Housing Advocates with a similar explanation, similar situation where it's actually kind of a small dollar amount, but their award was $25,000, so it exceeds 25%. And then similar situation for the Legal Aid Foundation of Santa Barbara County, where it's a position that went unfilled. So they're going to move the dollars over to what was originally a partially additional EAF funded DOEJ accredited representative so they can just have more funding for that work, which complies with the terms of that grant. I think my next slide is the resolution. So I'll see if there's pause and see if there's any questions about these 7 budget modification requests that exceeded 25% of the award. And if not, I have the resolution. I'll just leave that up so you can read it.
And when anyone is interested and ready, I would invite and welcome a motion to approve.
I'll move.
I'll second.
So I have Gonzalez moving and King seconding. Angie? Okay. All right, I'll take the vote. Gonzalez?
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Judge Klein,
Yes.
Milrod,
Yes.
Pryor,
Yes.
Stalker,
Yes.
and Galkin.
Yes.
7 yeses, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 abstentions. Motion passes. And I think we're coming up on our last item, so we're well ahead of schedule. So I'm pleased that we might be able to let everyone go a little early. But Jason, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, I think so. I think your prediction was correct that we would be timely when we talked about it. Moving on to item 4.6, approval of the 2025 CARE Act court budgets. I am inviting Lana Martin to present. I see Lana's here on this item. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jason. All right, so we can see my screen, correct?
Yes.
All right. Good afternoon. I'm Lana Martin, a senior program analyst, and I'm here to present the 25-26 CARE Court grant budgets for committee approval. So to provide a bit of background, the Commission administers funding to public defender offices, QLSPs, and support centers that participate in CARE Court. And CARE Court stands for Community Assistance, Recovery, and Empowerment Court. CARE Court is a statewide court program that was created by the CARE Act. It provides adults with qualifying serious mental health issues access to a range of services, which includes appointment of an attorney. So participating QLSPs and support centers are required to submit budgets for review and approval. This year, our timeline involved the GES committee approving the awards on June 24th, and then the Budget Act of 2025 passed on June 27th, which renewed the funding for our current state fiscal year. And the 4 QLSPs and 2 support centers submitted their budgets by July 15th. Similar to the review of IOLTA and EAF budgets, staff reviewed CARE Court budgets to verify that their totals match the final award amounts, that expenditures are allowable, and that the ratios of programmatic to administrative and personnel to non-personnel expenses followed the recommended 75 to 25% ratio. So as discussed in the memo, we did have one organization that deviated from the recommended budget allocation of at least 75% spending on personnel expenses. Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund proposed using only 63% of their budget for personnel. They did explain that they plan to use external consultants for interpretation and translation services, as well as a consultant to help shape their training and technical assistance that they provide to counties and QLSPs. Staff find this explanation reasonable and recommend approving this deviation. So again, we have for the 2025-26 CARE Court program, we have 4 QLSPs and 2 support centers participating. Staff verified that these budgets, the total amount per year match the approved allocations and that the proposed expenses are appropriate. As such, staff recommend approving all 6 of the budgets. And I have the resolution on screen for consideration by the GES committee, but first I'll pause and see if we have any questions.
Not look like you have any questions, so I will invite a motion.
I'll move.
Second.
Thank you. So I have that was Angie who moved, right? And Judge Klein who seconded. Thank you.
Correct.
Got it.
All right, the vote. Gonzalez,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Judge Klein,
Yes.
Milrod,
Yes.
Pryor,
Yes.
Stalker,
Yes.
and Galkin.
Yes, I muted myself.
So that's 7 yeses, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 abstentions, and motion passes.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Well, We beat predicted time. You were predicting 2 o'clock, Chris, so I think we did even better by
We
a
did.
significant margin.
This
So
meeting was originally scheduled for 4 hours, by the way. So that's how good
crushing it, team.
you are.
Doing a great job. I appreciate all of you. Thank you very much for your participation. Have a wonderful afternoon. And with that, we will adjourn.
Thank you everyone
Bye-bye.
so
Thank you.
much.
you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.